What's up, everyone? Welcome to the Offside Podcast. I am here with Coach Maria. Honestly, just got onto your stuff. Actually, real quick, make sure you guys subscribe to the channel. Everything helps. Appreciate it. But Coach, before we get into it, tell us who you are. Tell us where you're from. All the stuff that you do.
Yeah. So first of all, thanks for having me. This is an awesome platform for sure. Hit that subscribe button. I love your content. I love your guests that you've had. Any education, especially during this time, is great. So I love learning whenever I can. So yeah, I'm Coach Maria. I'm from Canada, born and raised just outside of Toronto. Spent most of my career here in Canada and got an opportunity to move to Italy when I was in ninth grade. See how I changed that up? I lived in the States, so I know you can't say grade 9. It's
grade 9.
Yeah, so I moved to Italy when I was 14, played there for a year, got called up to the U19 team. That was like the beginning of female soccer and like trying to get competitive soccer. From what I could see, there wasn't a league here. There wasn't kind of a pathway. I got cut from our provincial team, so like a state team.
Right.
And then 6 months later, found myself in Italy playing. So spent time there, came back, finished high school here, and then had the opportunity to play in the States. Great experience playing down there. I started at a JUCO and then moved myself to a Division II school again in university. Fell in love with not the playing part, but fell in love with the coaching part, which is not something that every athlete goes through. I just knew based off my college coach, who's basically my hero, my role model, I knew I wanted to do something with coaching, and I found myself at training, not learning as a player, but learning as a coach and kind of seeing that side of things. So when I was finished there and obviously left due to some injuries and just didn't continue on, I wanted to coach, and I wanted to get my license in the hardest place you can, and that was England. So moving myself to England to 2014, 2015 was a life-changing experience for me. I left here, said bye to everybody in my life and moved there, living in like a 16-person hostel, no money to my name, and going all the way from my grassroots coach course all the way up to my UEFA. Did some other courses there, but learned immensely. Came back here to Canada and was the first coach ever, female coach with TFC, which was a great experience. But then I kind of just branched off and did my own thing after that. Had some jobs in between, but wanted to ultimately do my own thing. And that's kind of where it's at now, as we have our supplementary training programs and working with male and female athletes to inspire them to continue on playing soccer and hopefully obviously getting a scholarship or going the pro route. So been an interesting journey, living and playing in 4 countries, been all over the world for soccer, but it's just been an amazing journey to see where we're at. And now I'm just based outside of Toronto again, and we're all over the city here with our programs.
Unbelievable, right? Unbelievable storytelling, unbelievable story. You've clearly done this before, but so let's go all the way back now, okay? Because a lot of my audience are younger kids, between 18 and 15, and so I want you to talk real quick about what did you go through as a kid when you moved to Italy? What were some of the challenges that you had, but also, clearly you saw it as an opportunity. What was that process like, going through that whole thing? How old did you say you were when you went to Italy?
Yeah, 14. So 14. Yeah, and I obviously had never been away by myself, and getting on a plane by yourself and just kind of, this is before social media. So this is like, you got to get a calling card to call home. So this was in
real quick.
Yeah.
For the people who know my story, I moved when I was 17, but I went with my dad for the first time when I was 14 to England, tried out, came back when I was 15 for the same club, played for them. And then 17 is when I actually moved over there for a brief spell. So I'm very familiar with, the process and stuff like that. But so sorry for cutting you off, but what were some things you went through in that situation?
No, and I think that's great, especially your story too, is kind of having some similarities because I find like you and I's time, it was obviously not the norm to leave, but I
Yeah.
feel it was a risk people took because you can't just pick up the phone and FaceTime or something. It's your kids in another country, hours ahead of where you are, and you're just hoping that they're calling every day, that you talk to them for a couple minutes. It's not like you could be texting and all of that. This is before. So it's just crazy to think about like that. But yeah, so similar to like a lot of youth players, what they go through here. Obviously, as a kid, you don't really know a lot of the politics side of soccer, and it happens. Like kids, I'm glad kids are aware of it, but aren't in it. So there was no reason for me to get cut from our provincial program. I mean, I was playing on the best team in I would say in Ontario at the time, and I see a lot of my teammates making the team, and I'm getting cut as a center back because I'm too short. And I remember the letter coming in the mail, and then just basically was cut because of that. And it was a moment where you're 13 years old, and a lot of players, especially females, could leave the sport, right? Like a lot of youth players go through that, is to say, okay, someone thinks in their opinion I'm not good enough. Why am I playing this, and why am I dedicating my time? But I took that as an opportunity to say, okay, I'm cut, no problem. What else can I do? And the opportunity came up in Italy. Someone said, hey, you have an Italian background, you have a passport. There's these opportunities to do high school there and play. And I just kind of sat down with my family and said, I have to take this opportunity, and moved, which was great. I don't remember, like when I left for England, I remember those feelings of like being alone and stuff like come up in my head. But I don't remember when I was 14, those feelings of like being alone. I don't remember what that feeling was, but I couldn't miss this opportunity. My family knew. Now, again, there was no pay involved. There was residence. So obviously I was staying and eating for free, but I wasn't getting paid. But it was an experience of a lifetime. So if players have that opportunity to go and just experience it, I think you have to go in with expectations that you might not make it because you're competing against so many players who are already in the system. But go for the experience. Go and see what Europe, South America, Asia are like compared to North America. And the differences, because I've learned so much across in Europe and all over compared to here in North America, and how the game is different. So if any youth players listening to this, absolutely take the opportunity to go.
I think so. There's a couple of things you said there, and I want to dive into all of them. But the first thing that stuck out to me was obviously the politics situation. But you were young, you got cut, even though you knew you were a decent player and that you should probably be on the team. How much of a role did your parents play in that situation, where they're like, you know what, it's okay, or were they were like, oh, or did they fight your battle for you and go over to the coaches and say, hey, what are you doing? My daughter's playing for the top team.
Yeah, so I think there's obviously, now looking at the coaching side, if we were to cut players or anything, parents uproar, there's all kinds of stuff. I think my parents took it as an opportunity to say, why was I cut? How, like, what can I improve on, and like, how can I get better? And obviously the letter that I got in the mail was pretty generic until we called and said, hey, we need feedback. What's the problem? Now, again, being short as a center back, again, I understand the North American game, tall, big center backs. I wasn't that big and I wasn't that tall, but I knew I could play. I knew I could ping a ball. Like, I knew I had that technical. And obviously hearing that message of being cut because you're short was like crazy to me thinking about back then, because then I found myself 6 months later playing the exact same position in another country and, making an impact. And then the national team kind of seeing me. So I kind of looked at it as, okay, maybe Canada is just a little bit further off than where Italy is. So my parents and I took that as an opportunity to call and kind of find out why and how I could improve. Now, again, it wasn't anything technical, tactical. It was my height, something physical. I wasn't developing as fast as some other players. So it's definitely something that I want all players to know, learn and know. Like, you look at the Messis of the world. I mean, he's making it at that stage. Or like Sebastian Giovinco, who played for TFC. I mean, I worked there and I met him and saw him all the time. He was shorter than me, and he's crushing it in Italy, and then he comes over to the MLS. So for any player listening, height won't make or break you. And I want players to know that. So if you do get cut, that's someone told me this, football's all about opinions. So if someone thinks that, then just move on, but don't give up.
I think so. So I was a center back. I
Yeah.
played center back at the pro level, and I got cut from teams that I would later go and play against for being too short. Right.
Yeah.
So I'm right there with you. I completely understand, and I'm 6 foot, so I understand completely. The thing that I wanted, the thing about that, and you're spot on, is, it's a game of opinions. We're talking about, for me personally, I look back and I've had about 15, 20 coaches that I've come in contact with who their opinion somewhat, mattered based on whether I was going to play or not. Right. But it was not until I literally wrote down in my phone who I thought I was, right? Who I thought I was as a player. And I remember writing down just 3 things that I was really good at. I wrote down, 1-2 touch player, good movement, and hard defensively, right? Those are my 3 things. So whatever a coach said about me, whatever a coach said after that point, whether they said that I was too small, or if they said that, I'm not technical enough, or whatever, my dribbling wasn't good enough, whatever it was, I could always come back and say, that's okay. They clearly weren't looking at my strengths. These are my strengths. These are what I bring to the table. If that's not what they need, that's fine. I'll go to someone else. And again, I heard it in the NFL talking about, you don't need 32. You don't need 32 yeses. You need one.
Mm-hmm.
One of those 32 teams, all they need to do is say yes to me, and I'm good. Right. And so that's sort of the same thing. And it's definitely a lesson that I want to harp on, is that just, if a coach says you're too small, or if a coach says you're not strong enough, or whatever it is, you can do 1 or 2 things. You can, listen to them and feed into that and just be like, okay, well, I guess I'm not going to play soccer. Or you can look at the players who did make it. Like you said, Messi, Giovinco. There's plenty of players out there to look at. That's the thing. There's plenty of players to look at. And how did they do it? How did they go about it? They made it. So what do I need to do in order to make it? And again, you only need 1 yes. You don't need 50 coaches to think you're the best thing ever. The second part of that is, I think it was really key. You said I was playing, like, literally a couple months later, I was playing in another country. Sometimes you just need to change your location. Sometimes you need to be around different eyes. And I think that is the biggest part of your story. And I think we've done a good job of covering before you left. Now I want to go into when you were actually there. And I think that's the opportunity that people aren't noticing. They're like, I'm going to miss my friends. I'm going to miss my coaches. I'm going to miss all these different things. But what you don't realize is you're going to get a fresh set of eyes. You're going to get a fresh location where you can reinvent yourself. You can, obviously improve yourself, learn new things. And I think that's what you said. It was perfect. Now I want to go into when you were there. How was the transition? How was the adjustment? Was it like a fish to water, or was it like a fish to climbing a tree? How was it?
Yeah, no, and as well, and you said so many good things too around like that self-reflection piece, which is huge. But I think players have to realize, and now obviously that I'm a coach and I'm not traveling as often, I'm kind of established here. I spent so many years away from my family, so was missing Christmas, Thanksgiving, birthdays, births of people in my family, funerals. Was it hard? Absolutely. I cherish those moments now, like Thanksgiving. I wasn't home for so long. So like, that's a holiday I really look forward to because I had missed it for so long. So like when Thanksgiving comes around, I get pretty excited. But those are moments that players have to realize. Now it's much easier to go across with, keeping up to date, FaceTiming. People are just a click away from getting in contact. So that side's much easier, but you have to be strong. You have to have the right mindset to be away. I know so many players that go away and then after a couple months, they're like, I can't do it. And it's trying to tell them and tell them my story and try and inspire them to say like it's worth it. Like you just have to kind of get through those months. But yeah, the transition for me, being a young teenager away from my family in a new country, speaking a new language, living across the street from the beach, was amazing. I mean, I was in a residence with professional players. There's a professional basketball team, so all those players live there. All the soccer players who were not from Italy. There was a couple other Americans and another Canadian there who lived. So it's kind of like this residence of like athletes. So we were all kind of going through the same thing together. Setting up stuff for Christmas in the where we ate, as a group, trying to make like a Canadian dish, an American dish. There were some Germans there, trying to like cook all together. So it's kind of nice to have that, but I think you need to be open, be independent, and obviously if you're an introvert, obviously it's hard to come out of your shell as an introvert, but you need to make friends, establish relationships. One of the people that I got really close to was the president of the club, who would literally after practice would like take me to go get pizza or something and drive me home. He was kind of my ride because I was on the way. And my Italian was good. Obviously he didn't speak a lick of English, but we just loved the game. We just loved talking about it, even if it was quiet. Whenever we did get into some controversy or some dialogue about the sport, we enjoyed each other's company. And I mean, I gravitated towards him because I saw him as like a father figure in there. And, it was just great to have. But definitely for players, the transition, you have to be open-minded. You have to stick it out, even if it's tough. I mean, I know I touched briefly on it, like, I was 24 years old living in a 16-person hostel in central London, people coming home at all kinds of hours, and I got to get up for my UEFA at 8 a.m. Not sleeping because they're obviously partying and I'm studying, but that's all I could afford. And I mean, I grinded that out, and it obviously paid off. But for players to kind of understand that and fight through it and get the experience of a lifetime, I mean, not everybody can say that they've been overseas playing the sport, but there's opportunities like crazy in the male and female game for players. It's just, you have to know that you're going to miss a lot of stuff here, and that's fine, because as you get older, you'll cherish those moments and you'll make up those memories.
The biggest thing for me, and when I was a kid, it was way easier for me because I just loved the game, right? So it's one of those things where I always look for kids now. Do you have passion? Do you have the willingness to be coached? And so like that. Now the next level for that, when you can tell if a player is going to be something real, is if they're willing to go to another country, right? And I think you look at all the stories of the great players, Cristiano Ronaldo, Lionel Messi, they went to another country. Obviously Ronaldo was from Portugal, so he went to Sporting Lisbon across the water off of his island. And he said he cried all the time. He wanted to talk to his parents all the time, but he had to go through that. I think, I'm trying to get my kids here to get out of their comfort zone and stuff like this, and training and stuff like that. But it's nothing compared to going overseas. Like, your whole life changes. Your whole, luckily I went to England, so English speaking, right? I played in Germany last year, so that was a different language. I had to learn, German, but I was lucky when I was younger, I went to England. So it's the same language, but it's still different. You're not with your family, you're not with your friends and all this stuff. And it's a lot easier when you have the definite goal of being a professional footballer, right? When you went to England to be a coach at the highest level, right? So when you have that drive and that goal, I think the problem nowadays, and I hate to be that guy who just like, oh, social media this, social media that, and all this, because it is the person, it is the individual, but having that definitiveness of just saying, I'm going to be a pro, or I'm going to be a top level coach, and then just going for it, right? Because I think right now in current climate of whatever, it's all about, oh, I want to be a pro, but I'm going to try to make it here in my own hometown, or I'm going to try to make it here in my city. When you look back on your career, when you look back at everything that happened, how important was moving when you were younger and moving when you wanted to become a coach? How important was that? And have you noticed like different moments because you touched on it a bit, that you sort of reverted back to when you were a kid, when you moved, and now when you were trying to be a coach, you sort of reverted back to, oh, I've done this before. I've been able to do this. So how important is it for kids at a younger age to do that?
Yeah, absolutely. You've said so many good points around like that homegrown player. Would I have loved to be a homegrown player? Absolutely. I think for players, and especially players like, I love Toronto. If there was ever a team here, obviously I'm retired now, but I can imagine players who kind of are in that, like, to play for your home club. But I think players have to kind of look at the rosters and how many homegrown players there actually are.
Right.
A lot of players here in North America, there isn't the stability. Obviously, they want to develop homegrown players because they're cheaper, and obviously the business side of it, which players should look into.
Right.
Homegrown players are cheaper. They're developing through the academy, but it's not often that. Let's say you're playing on a team of 18, all 18 are going to be homegrown players. You're lucky if one comes out. So you have to be able to be adaptable, be able to change, be able to be open to different opportunities. Like, I mean, here in Toronto, I talk to my players and they kind of like look at me like I have 9 heads when I say climate is a huge change for a player who is used to 4 seasons. It'd be freezing cold, and now you're looking at schools and pro teams in a Florida, or you want to go to California or Texas and try and make it there, and you won't be able to adapt to that climate. And it's just trying to give people that if you have a place in mind or you have a country in mind, you have to be able to learn away from soccer. Now you spend, and like you obviously went to Germany, you spend 3-4 hours a day there. So the 20 hours left in the day, you're spent in the culture of Germany, and, stores being closed in the afternoon sometimes, Sundays, not a lot of shops being open in Europe, not speaking the language, the climate being different. So I think players really have to invest and learn about those things before they make the move. So that way the transition is easier. Like, there's so many things like online, YouTube, Google are so helpful to say, hey, I'm moving to Germany, I'm moving to Bayern. What's a typical day in the life of Bayern? Where's the closest grocery store, shopping mall, etc. I think that will help a player kind of adapt. So when they get there, they're like, hey, I've done my research. I know what I'm going to do there. But I think for a player, it's definitely something you have to think of, and obviously get out of that mindset of just having one team in mind. Obviously, everybody wants to play for their team, but expand and open up. There's so many divisions, there's so many levels. Even here in North America, if you don't want to go overseas, there's so much here. But to make it just in one team, it kind of just pigeonholes you in that team. Open up your surroundings and learn about the culture and where you're thinking of going in the country.
Yeah. I mean, that when I look back on my life and my career, and now I'm listening to your story as well, the things that I always thought were like the worst things and the hardest things when I was younger actually helped me so much when I was older. Like I was born here in Florida, St. Augustine, Florida. Nice, sunny. We'd go to the beach after school, almost every day. My mom would take me. Then I moved through Atlanta. I moved to Minnesota, right? And so I spent 5 years in Minnesota, more than that. When I went to college, I kept coming back or whatever. So I spent a lot of time in Minnesota. We're talking about, obviously, in Canada, the type of weather there. I was like, this is the worst thing of all time. But I kept pushing through it, and I kept adapting and trying to figure out ways of making it better, like, doing stupid stuff, like training outside in the snow with like short sleeves on or something like that, like trying to make it better. And then I moved to Germany, where it's hailing at one moment, then it's snowing, then it's raining, then it's all these different things. And I'm like, this is horrible, but it's not Minnesota, negative 15 degrees Fahrenheit. So those moments when I was like, oh my goodness, this is horrible. I hate this. I wish I was back in Florida. Why did I move? Whatever, ended up being the reason that I was able to play well in Germany and all this stuff. So when I listen to your story and I hear like, oh, I went over there when I was 14 or whatever, and now you go back when you're trying to be a coach, for any of the kids listening, that you were spot on. It pigeonholes you to say, oh, I want to make it here in my hometown. When you leave at a young age, especially when you leave at a young age and you realize, oh, there's other players out here that may or may not be at my level doing the same thing at this team as I was doing way over here in this other country. Now it's like, where can I not go? Where can I not go? I can go to Asia if I want to. I can go to, Europe. wherever I want to go. And it's just that mindset that helped me, because later on when I came into the US or whatever, and I was trying to make it here in the US, then the opportunity came to go to Germany. I was like, it's no brainer. I've done this before. I've done this. And so listening to your story, it just brings me back to, oh, there are some moments when I was like, oh shoot, this is rough. This is tough, whatever. And then it helped me further on. But yeah, so you came back here to college, right? What was the thought process? Why did you come back? Why did you go to college, basically? Why did you come back to college? What was your goal of coming back to college? And how did that play out? How did that goal play out?
Yeah, so I obviously I remember I got called up. So I was playing like calcetto, which is like futsal in Italy, and obviously I was playing with the 11v11 team, and then just like you going to the beach every day, I was like crossing the beach, and then there was like a court there, like a street ball court, 4v4, like very fast, intense, small nets, and I would like, even before 11v11 training, I would like find and in Europe, and as you know, whoever's there you play with. There was older guys playing, younger kids with no shoes, kids shirtless playing, and you just joined in the game and you played. Right. So I found this love for like futsal, so calcetto in Italy, really young. And then obviously the U19 saw me through the 11v11 and through calcetto, and like had my name on a radar. And I remember my parents didn't come to visit me for a very long time, and I was thankful for that, because I could focus on school, and I could focus on my playing. And my parents flew down. My dad was already in Italy, but my mom and my sister flew down. And I remember they came to that tournament, and I remember the U19 coach coming up to me, and obviously like, I'd done some caps with them, but kind of offering me something more. Yeah. But it was seeing my mom and sister and kind of saying, I don't want to stay. I want to come home. And it was kind of like a moment where I always say this, and I joke around with them, is if they didn't come, maybe I would still be there. So when seeing them kind of said, okay, I want to come home. I want to finish high school. And I had the opportunity to continue my career, but I obviously wanted to come back to high school. So I went from...
real quick, let me stop on that, because for me personally, I don't necessarily resonate with that, because I would go to college for 8-9 months at a time and not see my family. Then they would come, we would hang out 3 or 4 days, we'd hang out, and then they would leave, and I'd be like, okay, great, let's go back to it. When I was 14, I went with my dad. I would always just be like, oh, I want to go by myself, whatever. He would just let me go to practice by myself, whatever. When I left at 17 and my passport, my visa didn't work out and I had to come back, I was devastated to come back. But for me personally, I love my family to death, but I would never do that. Right. So where did that come from? That idea of like, oh, I want to be back with my family. That, number one. And number two, the high school part. That's the other part I don't really resonate with. I hated school.
Yeah, no. And I didn't do well when I came back, because I was like this free kid doing like, and I'll put air quotes, like online.
Right.
As a freshman. And like, I would like go to school, and in Italy, you go to school Monday through Saturday, 8 to like 12 o'clock.
Right.
And I would like go check in, like show my face, say hi, and then say like to the principal there, like, oh, I have a game I got to go get prepped for. And there was like no communication between the school and there. So I would get away with it. And then I would leave school at like 9 o'clock, and then like be at the beach, like jumping off like the dock, or like swimming with my friends, playing, and then eating, napping, and then going out for the night. So that was like the life. So I never had like that school mentality. And obviously it hurt me when I came back, and it's a big part of my story. But I think I went to an elite athlete. I got into an elite athlete high school. So I always wanted to go back, because I knew we were going to be like state champions, like be very, very good. And I had missed the year, which kind of, for them, they had accepted me. And then I said, hey, I'm not actually coming. I'm going to Italy. So I wanted to go back, because I would call my friends, and they would say how good of a year they were doing. And I was like itching to go back, but I knew I had this opportunity in Italy. So yeah, going back thinking about it, if I stayed, what would I be like now? I mean, I obviously would have been a pro player with the Italian national team, probably playing for a big club, probably still playing because I'm 31 and obviously I don't play anymore, but I still would have been like at the end of my career, but probably still would have been in that system. So when I came back, I, like you, like I was not a good student athlete. I mean, I was barely passing classes here. I was always skipping. I just wanted to play. And my friends were like, no, like, Maria, we have to go to class. And I'm like, well, why can't we just go play? Or like, why can't we just do it? Because I was doing that in Italy. So when I came back, I definitely suffered. And that's obviously where I started my JUCO experience. But I was very immature when I came back, and, you know, I was a class clown in high school, and, you know, people who know me in high school now look at me and they're like, who are you? Because they don't believe that I'm this mature, like, not jokester person. But yeah, I struggled with that, and I did not like school. Why I went the college route is because I guess I didn't explore those opportunities to go back to Europe. I had kind of closed those doors. I was traveling with my travel ball team. We were traveling all across the United States. Coaches were looking at me. I mean, I had 63 offers. We went on 12 visits to schools, my mom and I, all the way from D1 to junior colleges. And I fell in love with some programs. But I knew, like, I was visiting like University of Nebraska, and I knew I didn't have the grades to go in there, but they're flying me out to go see it. So I wanted to experience that. You know, University of Cincinnati were playing their team, and I love the school, and I wanted to go.
Yeah, I've been there. I love Cincinnati. Cincinnati's
right?
great.
Yeah. And it was great to have all those offers, letters coming in, emails coming in, going on all these visits through 12th grade. But I knew I wouldn't get into those schools. And ultimately, it was obviously they invested a lot in me, and I was kind of like stringing them along. And then I said, hey, like, I'm barely passing high school here. But I think the junior college route was meant for me. I needed that time to develop. Not as a player, because I knew I could play, and I know I did so much there, like got so many records broken, all-American, all-region, all-conference, like all kinds of stuff. But it was that school part that I needed. But I found at the junior college, and it's not to diss a junior college, but you're there to get out, right? You're there to 100%. Show up, put your name on the paper. I mean, some teachers were like, if you just come to every class, we'll give you an A. And I'm like, oh my God, yes. So I knew I was there just to, like, put my name on it and get out, which most kids were. And then I, found myself at a Division II school, which was a top academic program and school in the country. And I knew I wouldn't be able to cut it for very long, because I didn't have that mindset of everything that happened to me in my youth career going into high school and college. So for athletes, obviously, we talk about that grades are so important. I work with so many student athletes to help them get scholarships, and a lot are in my boat. So I tell them my story, and, I don't want them to miss out on opportunities, because to be paid to get a scholarship and go to school is a great route. It's not for everybody.
Right.
But I think you have to know yourself, like, are you willing to put in 4 years more of school than high school? And some people aren't. I definitely wasn't. But I tried to convince myself I was.
Right. So I always go back to literally the first thing we're talking about. I wrote down, like, who I am. Right. And so for me, college was the only way I could go, because I went to England, came back. I went 1 year of college, and then I went back to England, and they're like, no, you're a little bit too old for our youth program. Okay, that's fine. So I came back. Now I was in college. I knew I had to go. Now I knew I had to go through the process now. Hopefully I can get out junior year, go into the MLS early. But once I went through that, once I came back from England from my freshman year, I was like, college is not for me. School is not for me. Now, we didn't have League Two at the time. We didn't have League One. We didn't have that. It was straight championship or MLS. And at that time, I wasn't good enough for those. So in my head, I was sort of in that gray area, right? I was just sort of like, school's definitely not for me. I would, sophomore year, the year I came back, sophomore year was a horrible year school-wise. But in my head, all I wanted to do was be a pro. And I've been that way since I was 8. I knew for a fact that I wanted to be a pro. I just needed to navigate it. I just needed to figure out a way to get through it. So I understand everything you're saying. And me going through the college process as well. Um, real quick, I want to go back to that. Do you have any tips for players? Because I give tips all the time on the college route and stuff like that, telling players like literally narrow it down to 8 to 10 maximum colleges, because realistically most players are not going to get the amount of offers that you got, the amount of offers I got. They're going to have to probably work their way in sophomore year, junior year, senior year, get colleges somewhat interested. My dad always told me, my dad's been in the game for a long time. He always told me that stick with the colleges that show interest into you first, because most colleges know who's out there. They already know who's out there. They're looking at sophomores and freshmen at this point. If they reach out to you and they contact you and they seem like they like you, put more effort into them. Every kid in the US wants to go play for Wake Forest or Clemson. And I'm just like, but I mean, why though? Why? Because they've heard something about it. They haven't really done the research. And I think that's why you see a ton of transfers right now. I've never seen this many transfers in college. Kids going from, point A to point B, spending 2 years there, doing a 5th year and going somewhere else or whatever. It's unbelievable to me. And so what would be your tips for young players going into college, and what can they do to make sure that they find a home that they can be at for 4 or 5 years?
Yeah, no, I like everything you said. And obviously here we have a disadvantage where you're not an access, like coaches have to obviously fly up. I mean, there's so many good schools just across the border. I mean, we're an hour and a half from Buffalo and there's so many great universities there, but they're not the big ones on TV.
Right.
I'm a diehard, and this might hurt some people, a diehard Duke fan. So Duke was always my school that I wanted to go to. And would I have loved to play at Duke for the women's soccer team? Absolutely. And I knew some friends that had played UNC and were like trying out at UNC, and UNC, like, they thought, oh, we're on the provincial team, we're in the national program. And then they go to UNC and play like their JV team and lose 14-0, girls scoring a bicycle kick on them. And they're like, oh yeah, I showed well. Well, coach is not going to look at you. You just lost 14-0. But like you said, like the big schools, Wake Forest, Clemson, we see on TV all the time. And we're like, oh, we want to go there. So I think it's education is number one for parents and players to say, it's great that you have those aspirations, but are those schools, like you said, reaching out? Are you with a national or provincial program? Have you been looked at them? Are you just going to these big camps that these schools put on and there's 300 kids and you're like, oh, hey, coach, I emailed you. And they're like, I have no idea who you are. And you have a number on your shirt. Right. So it's great for those big D1s. But if you're going to go to the school route, and this is kind of a question I have for you, like, look at the academics of it, because again, like, it's great if you have this aspiration to go in the MLS and stuff, but it's definitely like an academic course. Like you're taking academics, you're there to get education. Yes, you're not being paid, but my mindset was, hey, my school's $50,000. You're giving me a scholarship. This is like, I am being paid, but instead of being paid, you have a degree. Right. So I think that's the message for a lot of people is, like you said, do your research. Coaches will reach out. Get your parents to film anything. Now, my mom was coming with like this big camera to like my practices and my games. I'm like, you're so embarrassing doing this. But it paid off because I had all this footage of me where like some of my kids that I was playing with, like my colleagues and my teammates were like, oh yeah, no, they'll find me. They'll come out to my games, and then they're in grade 12 and they're like, oh my God, I have no offers or whatever. But my question for you is around, because we've kind of been on the same journey of not doing the school process. And some people look at me and they're like, don't tell my kid not to go to school, but it's not for everybody. Do you find that you have those real conversations with those kids who maybe aren't like the academic kids and they're not meant for school? Because I find sometimes it's tough to navigate with the parent to say, hey, listen, your kid's getting like scraping by with C's. They're not going to get into these top universities that you think they're going to go to. And there's nothing wrong with that. But do you find those conversations you're having with your kids and the people you work with now?
So my thing right now is the kids that I'm working with are either mostly international, or they're younger kids, right? And so it's a little bit easier for me to talk to the parents of the younger kids, because I mean, the kid's 11 and we're talking about him going to play for Wake Forest. Like, first and foremost, make sure that he's doing well Monday through Friday, right? And I can help you with that because I see him Monday through Friday. We can help him. We can work through that. When it comes to school and all that stuff, again, 11 is a little bit too young to be saying he's good at school, he's not good at school. Anytime a parent asks me about like my college experience and stuff like that, I'm just honest with them and say, school wasn't for me, right? I dropped out, three years into college, I dropped out because I was there for one reason and one reason only, and that's to get looked at. I did everything I said I was going to do in college. I came to a smaller school, SIUE, a smaller school, and now it's a school that's on the map, right? And so finished in the top 25. So it's something that I did. I went there with one reason, and I was lucky enough to have parents who stood behind me and said, "Okay, we understand you went there for one reason. Just stay eligible. That's all we ask." And that's what I did. So I'm lucky to have parents that saw me for who I really was and didn't look at a grade and said, "Oh, you're getting a D in this philosophy class. You're not going to be someone." And I'm telling these parents right now that the pressure you're putting on your kid, that something that you might not even notice, but something that you're talking with this parent about, like, "Oh, did you see Tommy? He went to Wake Forest." And now your kid's looking at you saying, "Oh, if I want my dad to talk about me, I want my dad to say that I'm good. I want my dad to say I'm someone. I have to go to Wake Forest." And then they don't get into Wake Forest. They don't get into Clemson. They don't get into California or Stanford. They don't get in these colleges. And now they're wondering, like, who am I? What am I doing? All this stuff. And it all comes from the parents' expectations. And, I try to talk to the parents almost every week about, listen, your kid is going to be fine. I believe in myself. So I always tell them, like, hey, they're in good hands. I'm a good coach. I know how this route goes. So just trust me. And, 60% of them are going to be like, "Whatever, coach. No, we don't trust you." Anyway, but it's all good. And so I always talk to them and say, look at it. Just be okay with your kid being where he is and getting to the next level. I've been very, very big on, whether it's on my Instagram or whether it's on in person, just worry about the next step. Don't worry about all the way over there. Just the next step. What's the next step for Johnny? The next step for Johnny is the second team. He's on the third team right now. The next step is the second team. Don't worry about Clemson. Don't worry about Wake Forest. Don't worry about Florida Gulf Coast or whatever. Just get to the second team, right? Then to the first team, and then start scoring goals, start working on that. And then let's start working on what's next. They're worrying about college at the age of 11. And I think that's a problem. And I was so lucky to have a mom and a dad and a sister who understood who I was, a little bit different than most. I never cared about school. I never did any of that. I learned on my own. Mm-hmm. I was always reading books, always watching YouTube, and like just trying to figure things out. And I still am like that. And they saw that and they realized that if I get a D on this test, it doesn't mean I'm not smart. It doesn't mean I'm not educated. It doesn't mean I'm not, a good person. And I urge parents to really think about how they're talking about school and how they're talking about, just education in general, right? And so that's a long answer. How I deal with it.
No, but you resonated with me because I think a pivotal moment in my career was I'll never forget this one player was like, Coach Maria, and I knew she wasn't good enough. Coach Maria, I want to go to Syracuse. The coach sent that like generic email like, "Hey, you've been invited to our camp," and she's like, "Can you put in a good word for me?" And it was like a moment in my career because not only did opportunity for a job kind of lose out to this because the parent was so upset and like talking so much behind my back about it. But it was a moment where I could have gassed her up and said, "Yes, you're good enough. I'll put in that," without it and ruin my reputation. Or I could tell her she's not good enough. And to tell a 16-year-old girl, "No, you're not good enough," is not an easy thing to do. But we have to be realistic with these kids. If I tell every kid they're going to get into Duke or Wake Forest, all of these schools, I always say this, I'll be driving a Ferrari and be living in a mansion and be doing it the wrong way and making money the wrong way. So I think we have to be realistic as where players are, and you have to be open for that. Now, again, my opinion of this player was that she wasn't ready for Syracuse, nor was she good enough to go. That's my opinion. Someone else could gas her up and tell her that she's good enough. But my opinion is you're not good enough. And I know the game. I played there. I know what it's like to get at that level, and you're not going to cut it.
Right.
Obviously, she's went like so many tiers down now and signed at a school, which is even for her. But it was a moment in my career that I'll never forget, because it made me realize sometimes how players don't take feedback, or parents don't take feedback and think their kid is the next Messi and Ronaldo. And there's only Messi and so many Messi and Ronaldos in the world, but we have to be realistic with them. And if they don't have it, they're not passing fitness tests, they're not at the level, it's okay to not go D1. It's not D1 or bust, like that the saying. So I think, I resonate with that, and I'm honest with people to their level to say, hey, listen, you're not there now. I have to do a better job, because sometimes it's tough telling players that I work with for so long, hey, listen, you're not cut out for it. But it's having those realistic conversations, and them kind of realizing it as well.
We're coming up to time, but that's spot on, because one of my best friends, he's a doctor now. Like he's gone through a hard, plan of college and all that stuff. Doctors have to go through or whatever. But the moment that he realized, like, oh, I want to be a doctor, is when our coach basically told him, like, you're not good enough to play for our team in college. He said, you're basically not going to play. You're not good enough. And he wasn't being, he wasn't being an ass about it, but he was like, you're not good enough. And in that moment, he thought to himself, like, what am I doing? Am I doing this because my 5 other friends are doing it? Or am I doing this because this is something that I want to pursue, because this is going to get hard? And at that moment, he's like, you know what? I'm stepping away. And we all looked at him at the time like, what? Like, why are you doing that? Whatever. But afterwards, he said that was the best thing that anyone has ever said to him, that you're not going to play. Maybe you should start like on that next thing now. He's like, I would have been 2 years behind. I would have been like just getting into whatever, the doctorate program or whatever it is. And he's like, I would just now start doing that. And I found also with myself is that, my fiance basically told me, like, hey, either we're going to do this and you're going to have to go, it's going to be really, really tough on our relationship, or you need to make a decision now that this is for you or this is not for you. Because some things happen in the pro game, clubs taking payment, like all these different things that I was naive to. I wasn't naive in college. I knew what college was all about. I thought I knew what the pro game was about. When you sign a contract, they have to pay you this amount of money. That's not the case. Mm-hmm. That's not the case. And so we're like, do we want to keep having a club pay for our living, or do we want to make our own living or something like that? And I made that decision. If she hadn't come around and told me that, then maybe I still would be moving around and stuff like that, and trying to find a foothold and trying to find a 2-year contract or whatever. And so it's those real conversations that, just like you said, the real conversation you had with her saying, listen, you're not good enough to play there, doesn't mean that you're not good enough to play somewhere. You're, again, pigeonholing. Do not pigeonhole yourself into this one program. And if you don't make that, it's the end of the world and you're not good enough to be a human being. No, there's thousands of colleges here in the US. There's one out there that's perfect for you, that you're going to go to, you're going to learn, and you're going to make a difference. Right. And so it's those real conversations that hurt, but at the same time, those are the conversations that are literally the most important conversations you can have, whether you're giving them or you're taking them, that you can have in your whole life. And that will literally set up the rest of your life.
Mm-hmm. And I think, like you said, like, listen to pros now. I'm not a pro by any means, but I do have experience that I've played and coached these players. So again, I think it's be open to feedback and make sure you understand and say, okay, listen, this is a coach's feedback. It's not saying I'm not good enough, I should quit. It's just, okay, this is what they think I need to work on. I'll work on it, and not blow up or not say they don't know what they're talking about. I'm going to go, and then you embarrass yourself at these schools you shouldn't be at. So I think we've created a good network here to have those realistic conversations. It's not always easy, but I think it's, like you've said, it's so important to talk about and be open to feedback. I'm open to feedback as a coach. I ask for feedback all the time from my peers, which is good. And sometimes my peers say, hey, listen, that wasn't a good session. This is what you need to do.
Coach, can you hear me?
Yeah, all good.
So sorry. Yeah,
Oh
yeah.
my God, don't worry. All good.
So yeah, real quick, just what were you saying about the pros and all that?
Yeah, no, I was just saying, like, obviously just give feedback and be open to it, and not just obviously be in a situation where you're not open to it and then you hate the coach and all of this. Like, be open to the feedback. I get feedback as a coach now from my peers who tell me, hey, this isn't a good session. This is what you need to work on. I'm fine with that. I've accepted that you're going to make mistakes. Like, I'll make mistakes today in my daily journey, and that's comes from like lessons in life and in soccer, which teaches you so many life lessons. So it's just overcoming those lessons, like you said, that self-reflection that you did, I think is so important for a player, and be open for criticism, because not everybody's going to gas you up and say, hey, you're the best thing since sliced bread.
Right. Coach, thank you so much for coming. Anyone watching this, make sure you go follow Coach Maria Soccer. I really love what you're doing with your Instagram as well. I mean, the shout outs, you talked earlier on about the education of we need to educate players, we need to educate parents and stuff like that. The things you put on, about college soccer, things you put on about professional soccer is great. We're talking about not gassing people up, but I love when you post young players doing well. That's number one. And then also, the takeovers and all that stuff. I really love it. And I'll probably implement them into my own Instagram at some point. But I appreciate you coming on, and thanks so much.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you for having me. This is a great platform, and hopefully we can continue this conversation. And thanks everybody for listening. So enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks, Coach.
All right. Bye-bye.